Elira didn't know that the man standing in the doorway had buried 3 women who dared to love him. She didn't know that his touch carried a curse older than the kingdom itself, or that every healer, seer, and witch in the realm had declared him untouchable. And she certainly didn't know that by morning she would be the first woman in his entire life to fall asleep in his arms and wake up breathing. All she knew was that her shift at the Hollow House was supposed to end at midnight, and the clock had already struck 1. The Hollow House wasn't a place people came to live. It was where they came to die. A crumbling stone building at the edge of Merwin Village, where the terminally ill spent their final days. Elira had worked here for 6 years, ever since her mother passed and left behind nothing but debt, and a secret Elira would take to her grave. She had no magic. In a world where even the poorest farmer could conjure a spark of flame or sense the weather's turn, Elira was hollow, empty, a void in human form. If anyone discovered the truth, she'd be cast out. Voids were considered cursed, bad luck given flesh. So she kept her head down, changed soiled linens, held dying hands, and pretended she was simply too tired to demonstrate her abilities. Tonight, she was mopping the front hall when the door groaned open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and something darker. Something that made the hairs on her arms rise. Elira looked up and forgot how to breathe. He filled the doorway like a shadow-given form. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black traveling clothes that did nothing to hide the predator's build beneath. His hair was dark as ink, falling past his jaw in damp strands, and his face. His face was the kind that ruined women. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth carved for cruelty, and eyes the color of a winter sky just before a killing frost. Pale blue, almost silver, and utterly guarded. Like whatever lived behind those eyes had learned long ago that feeling things only led to pain. There was something unsettling about his stillness, the patience of a predator who had been watching long before she noticed him. "We're not accepting new patients tonight," Elira said. Surprised, her voice came out steady. "The attending physician returns at dawn. You'll have to—" "I'm not here for a physician." His voice rolled through the empty hall like distant thunder. Low, controlled, with an edge that made her grip the mop handle tighter. "Then what do you want?" He stepped inside, and Elira noticed something strange. The candles in the wall sconces flickered violently as he passed, their flames bending away from him as if repelled. The shadows seemed to lean toward him, eager, hungry. "I need a room for the night," he said, "somewhere no one will look for me. This is a death house, not an inn." "Exactly." Something flickered across his expression, there and gone. "No one looks for the living among the dead." Elira should have refused. Every instinct screamed that this man was dangerous, that letting him stay would invite something terrible into her carefully constructed life. But there was something in the way he said it. A weariness so profound it made her chest ache. "One night," she heard herself say, "and you're gone before the physician arrives." The stranger inclined his head, and the ghost of something, gratitude, maybe, or surprise, softened the brutal lines of his face. "One night," he agreed. But his eyes said he was lying. Elira led him to the room at the end of the east corridor, the one they used for storage rather than patients. It was cramped and dusty, but it had a lock on the door and no windows facing the street. "It's not much," she said, pushing the door open. "It's perfect." He moved past her, and she caught his scent. Not perfume or sweat like most travelers. Something clean and cold, like snow on stone. And beneath it, a trace of something metallic. Blood. Old blood. Scrubbed away, but never quite gone. "You're injured," she said before caution could intervene. The stranger turned, one eyebrow raised. "What makes you say that?" "I work with the dying. I know what blood smells like, even when someone's tried to wash it away." For a long moment, he simply stared at her, those winter eyes cataloging her face, her posture, the mop still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. Then, slowly, He shrugged off his coat. Alira's pulse spiked. His left arm was wrapped in makeshift bandages, soaked through with crimson. The wound beneath looked deep, and even from across the room, she could see the angry red edges of infection setting in. "You need a healer," she said. "Healers won't touch me." His tone was matter-of-fact, almost bored. "No one will." "That's ridiculous. You'll lose the arm if that festers. Possibly your life." "Wouldn't be the worst thing." The words hit her like a slap. Not because they were dramatic, but because he said them the way someone might comment on the weather. Casual, resigned. "Sit down," Alira ordered, surprising herself. "I'll get supplies." "You don't want to do that." "You're right. I don't. But I'm also not going to let a man die of stubbornness in my storage room. The paperwork would be nightmarish." His features softened almost imperceptibly. "You're not afraid of me?" "Should I be?" "Everyone else is." "I'm too tired for fear. Sit." She didn't wait for his response, just turned and walked to the supply closet. Her hands trembled as she gathered bandages, salve, and a bottle of alcohol for cleaning. What was she doing? She didn't know this man, didn't know why he was running, or from what, or why healers refused to treat him. But she'd spent 6 years watching people die alone. Something in his eyes told her he expected the same fate, and for reasons she couldn't explain, that made her angry. When she returned, he was sitting on the narrow cot, his ruined arm extended. Up close, the wound was worse than she'd thought. A blade had carved deep into the muscle and dark lines were already spreading from the edges. "This is going to hurt," she warned, uncorking the alcohol. "Pain and I are old friends." She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, but he didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just watched her with those pale eyes like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You have no magic," he said quietly. Alira's hands froze. "I can feel it. Or rather, I can't feel anything." He tilted his head, studying her. "You're empty. A void." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "How do you—" "Because I've spent my entire life searching for someone exactly like you." Alira pulled back, the bloodied cloth falling from her fingers. "What do you mean, searching for someone like me?" The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he raised his uninjured hand, palm up, and a flame flickered to life above his skin. Blue-white, cold rather than warm, and casting shadows that moved wrong. "I am Theron Veilcroft," he said, "Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and I am cursed." The name hit her like ice water. Theron Veilcroft, the Ghost King, the man whose touch meant death. She'd heard the stories since childhood, whispered around hearth fires and tavern tables. His mother had died giving birth to him. His nurse died within a month. Every woman who grew close to him, who cared for him, who loved him, withered and perished. 3 betrothals, 3 funerals. They said he'd stopped attending the burials after the second. They said he was a monster wrapped in a king's skin. "The curse feeds on magical essence," Theron continued, closing his fist and extinguishing the flame. "Any woman with even a trace of power who stays near me too long begins to fade. Their magic drains first, then their life force. The closer the bond, the faster they die." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I watched my last betrothed turn to ash in my arms. That was 3 years ago. I haven't touched anyone since." Alira's mouth was dry. "And you think because I'm a void? You have no essence to drain. The curse would have nothing to feed on. In theory, you could survive me. In theory. I won't lie to you. It's never been tested. Every void I've found was either too old, too young, or too terrified to try. And you expect me to just— what? Volunteer as an experiment? No." His gaze dropped to his wounded arm, to her careful bandaging. "I expected you to throw me out the moment you learned what I was. Most people don't even let me finish explaining before they run." The vulnerability in his voice was almost worse than the curse itself. Elira had spent her life hiding what she was, ashamed of her emptiness. But Theron had spent his life being feared for something he couldn't control, watching everyone he cared about die. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. "Really? A king doesn't hide in a death house without reason." Theron's jaw tightened. "Because someone is trying to destroy what's left of my kingdom. They've taken my brother, my only family, and they're using him as leverage. I've been fighting shadows for months, and the wound you just cleaned was a parting gift from my most trusted advisor." His eyes met hers, and the desperation there stole her breath. "I need help. I need someone who can get close to me without dying. And you're the first person in 20 years who hasn't flinched when I walked into a room." Elira thought about the life waiting for her. The endless nights in the hollow house. The debt that never shrank. The secret that chained her to this village. Then she looked at the cursed king bleeding on her storage room cot, asking for help from a woman the world considered worthless. "What exactly are you proposing?" Theron studied her for a long moment, as if weighing whether she was serious or simply hadn't understood the danger. 7 days, he said finally. "That's all I'm asking. Come with me to the Northern Territories. Help me find where they're keeping my brother. In exchange, I'll clear your mother's debt entirely and give you enough gold to disappear. New name, new village, new life. No one will ever know you're a void." Elira's chest tightened. Her mother's debt was a noose she'd worn for 6 years. 300 gold pieces borrowed from a merchant named Corvath, who'd been collecting interest with cruel patience ever since. At this rate, she'd be paying until she died. "How do you know about my debt?" "I've been searching for voids for a long time. When I find one, I learn everything about them before making contact." He didn't sound apologetic. "I know Corvath has been threatening to sell your contract to the pleasure houses in the capital. I know you've been skipping meals to make payments. I know you haven't slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 years." The accuracy of it should have frightened her. Instead, it made her angry. "So you've been watching me, studying me like some kind of specimen?" "Yes." No excuse, no softening. "And in all that watching, I learned something else. You're kind to people who don't deserve it. You hold the hands of the dying even when no one pays you to. You give your bread to the orphans on Merwin Street." His voice dropped. "You're a good person, Elira, and I'm asking you to help me save the only family I have left." The rawness in his words cracked something inside her. She thought of her own mother, wasting away in a bed not unlike the ones in this very building. How Elira would have done anything, bargained with anyone, to save her. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "and the curse doesn't kill me, what then? You just let me walk away? You have my word. The word of a king I just met. The word of a man who has buried everyone he's ever loved." His jaw tightened. "I don't break promises, Elira. It's the only thing I have left." She should refuse. She should send him away and go back to her mop and her debt and her slow, grinding existence. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "I want a binding oath, something that can't be broken." Theron's eyebrows rose slightly. "You know about binding oaths? I work in a death house. People make all kinds of promises when they're dying. I've learned which ones hold." For the first time, something like respect flickered in his pale eyes. He extended his uninjured hand, palm up. "Then we bind it in frost and shadow, the old way." Elira hesitated, then placed her hand in his. The cold hit her first, a shock of ice that raced up her arm and wrapped around her heart. She gasped, tried to pull back, but his fingers closed around hers, not trapping, anchoring. Then came the darkness. It poured from where their skin touched, curling around their joined hands like living smoke. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Safe. The shadows weren't attacking her. They were welcoming her, curling around her like a cat seeking warmth. Theron's expression shifted from concentration to shock. He was staring at their joined hands, at the shadows that had wrapped around Elira like armor rather than chains. "That's not possible," he breathed. "What? What's happening?" He looked up at her, and for the first time, his guarded eyes held something raw. Something almost like hope. "The curse isn't just ignoring you, it's protecting you." They left before dawn. Theron had a horse waiting outside the village, a massive black stallion with eyes that glowed faintly amber in the darkness. Elira had never ridden anything larger than a mule, but when Theron lifted her into the saddle like she weighed nothing, she was too stunned to protest. He mounted behind her, one arm circling her waist to hold the reins. The proximity should have been uncomfortable. Instead, that inexplicable feeling of protection returned, stronger now. The curse's shadows curled at the edges of her vision, not threatening, but present, watching. "The journey to Valdris takes 2 days," Theron said against her ear. His breath warm despite the cold that emanated from his skin. "We'll stop at a safe house tonight. I have allies there." "Allies who know what you are?" "Allies who knew what I was before the curse. They remember the boy, not the monster." The bitterness in his voice made her chest ache. She thought about asking more, but exhaustion was already pulling at her. 6 years of 4-hour nights had left her running on fumes, and the steady rhythm of the horse's gait was hypnotic. "Rest," Theron said quietly. "I won't let you fall." Elira wanted to argue. She'd never let herself be vulnerable around anyone, let alone a cursed king she'd known for less than a night. But her body betrayed her. Her eyes closed, her head tipped back against his shoulder, and for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming of debt collectors and empty bellies. When she woke, the world had changed. They were in the mountains now, pine forests giving way to snow-capped peaks that pierced a sky the color of bruised plums. The air was thin and sharp, carrying the scent of ice and something else, something wild. "Welcome to the Northern Territories," Theron said. "My kingdom, or what's left of it." Below them, nestled in a valley between 2 peaks, lay a city unlike anything Elira had imagined. Valdris. Buildings carved from dark stone rose in elegant spires, their windows glowing with warm light despite the cold. Bridges arched between towers, and she could see people moving through the streets, their breath misting in the mountain air. It looked like a fairy tale, the kind her mother used to tell her before the debt, before the sickness, before everything fell apart. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's dying." Theron's voice was flat. "My brother was the heart of this place. Without him, the people are losing hope. And without hope, the curse spreads faster. The curse affects the land too. The curse affects everything I touch." He urged the horse forward. "Come. There's something you need to see before we reach the castle." He guided them down a narrow path, away from the city, toward a grove of trees that stood apart from the forest. Their bark was black, their branches bare despite the season. And hanging from every branch were ribbons, hundreds of them, faded by sun and rain, frayed by time. "What is this place?" Elira breathed. Theron dismounted, then helped her down. His hands lingered at her waist for just a moment. This is the Grove of the Lost. 1 ribbon for every woman the curse has taken." His voice broke on the last word. "I come here to remember that I'm not allowed to forget." The castle rose from the mountain itself, dark stone towers seamlessly merging with the peak behind it. Inside, Elira expected coldness, both temperature and temperament. She found neither. Servants greeted Theron with genuine warmth, their eyes flickering to Elira with curiosity, but no hostility. A woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes introduced herself as Marin, the head of household, and immediately began fussing over Elira's travel-worn appearance. "You'll want a bath and fresh clothes before dinner," Marin said firmly. "His Majesty forgets that humans require more than brooding and vengeance to survive." "I don't brood," Theron muttered. You absolutely brood. You've been brooding since you were 12. Marin patted his arm, seemingly unbothered by the curse, then ushered Alira away before she could protest. The bath was heaven. Hot water, scented oils, and blessed solitude to process everything that had happened. Alira sank into the copper tub and let herself feel the impossibility of her situation. Yesterday, she was mopping floors in a death house. Today, she was bathing in a king's castle, bound by shadow magic, to help him rescue his brother. Her life had become one of her mother's fairy tales. She just wasn't sure yet if it was the kind with a happy ending. That evening, Theron led her to a room deep within the castle. Unlike the warm, lived-in spaces above, this chamber was cold and clinical. Stone walls, no windows, and a single table in the center. On the table lay 3 objects arranged on black velvet: a silver ring, tarnished with age; a torn piece of cloth, stained dark; a dagger with a broken blade. "These belong to my brother," Theron said quietly. "The ring was our mother's, passed to him when she died. The cloth is from his cloak, found at the site of his abduction. The dagger was his favorite weapon, snapped during the struggle." Alira approached the table slowly. Even without magic, she could feel something emanating from the objects. Not power, exactly. Memory. Pain. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing you're not willing to do." Theron stood on the opposite side of the table, keeping distance between them. "But I've consulted with scholars who study voids. They believe your emptiness might work differently than we assumed. Instead of just being immune to magic, you might be able to absorb it. Draw it into yourself and read what it contains. Like a sponge. Like a mirror. Magic passes through everyone else, altered by their own essence, but you have no essence to alter it. You might see it purely, truthfully." Alira looked at the objects, thought about what he was asking. "And if it hurts me? Then we stop. Immediately. You promise? On my brother's life. On my own." She believed him. That was the terrifying part. Alira picked up the ring first. The effect was instantaneous. Cold rushed through her. Not Theron's familiar frost, but something older, stranger. Images flooded her mind. Not memories, exactly, but impressions. A young man with Theron's eyes, but a warmer smile. A struggle in darkness. Hands grabbing, voices shouting. And beneath it all, a name whispered like poison: Valdric. She dropped the ring, gasping. "What did you see?" Theron was beside her instantly, not touching but close enough that his presence steadied her. "Your brother. The abduction. And a name." She met his eyes. "Valdric. Does that mean anything to you?" Theron's face went white. "Valdric is my uncle, my father's younger brother. He was exiled 20 years ago for attempting to seize the throne. He's back. And he has Kaelin." Theron's hands clenched into fists. Valdric was always ambitious, but this, taking Kaelin, using him as leverage. What could he possibly want? "There's more." Alira reached for the cloth, bracing herself. This time, the cold came faster, harder. She saw a fortress built into a cliffside, waves crashing far below. She saw Kaelin in a cell, thin but alive, writing something on the wall with a piece of stone. A message. She couldn't read it, but she could feel its desperation. And then she saw something else, a woman standing in shadow giving orders. Her face was hidden, but her voice was clear. "The king must suffer before he dies. Let him believe he can save his brother. Let him bring the void to us. Then we take them both." Alira's eyes flew open. "It's a trap." "What?" "They know about me. They want you to bring me here." Her hands were shaking. "The woman said to let you believe you can save Kaelin. She said to let you bring the void. Theron, they're not just using your brother as bait. They're using him to catch us both." The shadows around Theron flared, his control slipping. "Who? Who is this woman?" Alira reached for the broken dagger. She needed to know. The vision hit like a hammer. She saw the woman's face clearly now. Saw her standing beside Valdric. Saw her laughing as she plunged a knife into the back of Marin, Illyra choked out. The woman with silver hair. She's working with your uncle. Theron went absolutely still, and somewhere in the castle above them, a door slammed shut. Theron moved before Illyra could process what was happening. He grabbed her hand and pulled her through a hidden door behind the stone table, into a passageway she never would have found on her own. Theron. Quietly. His voice was barely a breath. These tunnels run beneath the entire castle. Marin doesn't know about them. No one does except me and Kaelin. They moved through darkness, Theron's hand never leaving hers. The shadows that usually curled around him now wrapped around them both, muffling their footsteps, hiding their presence. Illyra should have been terrified. Instead, she felt that impossible safety again, stronger than before. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, they emerged into a small chamber carved from the mountain itself. A natural hot spring steamed in one corner, and furs lined the stone floor. Emergency supplies lined rough-hewn shelves. A bolt hole, Theron explained, finally releasing her hand. Built by my grandfather for exactly this kind of situation. Illyra sank onto the furs, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. The visions had drained something from her, left her hollow in a way that had nothing to do with her void nature. How are you feeling? Theron crouched before her, his pale eyes scanning her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Like I've been turned inside out. She tried to smile. But I'll survive. You keep saying that. Survive. He reached out, hesitated, and then gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was cold, but not unpleasantly so, like pressing your cheek against a cool pillow on a summer night. Don't you ever want more than survival? The question opened something in her chest she'd kept locked for years. I stopped wanting more a long time ago. Wanting leads to disappointment. Disappointment leads to pain. It's easier to just endure. That's not living. That's just dying slowly. Says the man who visits a grove of ribbons to remind himself he's not allowed to be happy. Theron flinched, and Illyra immediately regretted her words. I'm sorry. That was cruel. It was honest. He sat back on his heels, his expression unreadable. I've spent so long punishing myself for what the curse has done that I forgot there might be another way. And then you walked into that death house with your mop and your sharp tongue, and for the first time in years I felt something besides guilt. Illyra's pulse quickened. What did you feel? Hope. The word seemed to cost him something. Stupid, dangerous, irrational hope. Because you looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster, not a king, just someone who needed help. You are just a man. She reached out, her fingers brushing his jaw. His skin was cool, smooth, and she felt him shudder at the contact. A man who's been carrying an impossible weight alone for far too long. Illyra. Her name was a warning and a plea wrapped together. I know the curse could still hurt me. I know this might be temporary. I know we're hiding in a cave while your own household plots against you. She held his gaze. But right now, in this moment, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of the curse. The only thing I'm afraid of is walking away from this and spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Theron's control shattered. He kissed her like a man who'd been starving for centuries and finally found sustenance. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, something he couldn't quite believe was real. The cold of his touch sparked against her skin, but instead of pain, she felt electricity, connection, belonging. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Theron pressed his forehead to hers. I've wanted to do that since you threatened to make me fill out paperwork if I died in your storage room. Despite everything, Illyra laughed. That's what won you over? My administrative concerns? That's when I knew you were different. Everyone else sees the curse first. You saw the inconvenience. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You saw me. I still see you. she whispered, "and I'm not going anywhere." Theron pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her as the shadows curled protectively around them both. For the first time in 20 years, warmth bloomed in his chest where only cold had lived. And for the first time in 6 years, Alira let herself want something more than survival. They stayed in the bolt hole until the castle quieted. Theron used the time to plan, his strategic mind working through possibilities while Alira rested against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. It was strange, she thought. The most feared man in the kingdom, and his heart sounded just like anyone else's. Steady, strong, alive. "Marin has been with my family since before I was born," Theron said quietly, his fingers absently stroking her hair. "She held me when I was an infant, before the curse fully manifested. And later, I learned she'd been taking a potion, something Valdric provided. A suppressant that masked her magical essence from the curse. I thought it was her own remedy for some illness. I never questioned it. So Valdric's been protecting her this whole time, planning for years. Decades, maybe." His jaw tightened. "I was so desperate for any connection that I never wondered if her survival was cultivated, rather than natural. You can't blame yourself for wanting someone close to you. Can't I?" He exhaled slowly. "She was the only woman who could touch me without dying. I trusted her completely. And I invited her into every corner of my life." Alira sat up, meeting his eyes. "We can still stop this. We know about the trap. We know where Kaelin is being held. A cliffside fortress in enemy territory, surrounded by soldiers loyal to my uncle, with a traitor controlling my own household." Theron's smile was bitter. "The odds aren't exactly in our favor." "Since when do you care about odds?" He blinked, surprised by her fierceness. "You've been fighting this curse alone for 20 years, Alira continued. "You've buried everyone you loved and kept going. You built a kingdom that doesn't fear you because you made them feel safe despite what you are. That's not the work of a man who calculates odds. That's the work of a man who refuses to quit." A crack appeared in his careful mask, the despair giving way to something brighter. "You're quite terrifying when you're inspiring," he murmured. "I learned from the dying. They have no patience for self-pity." She took his hand. "We have advantages Valdric doesn't know about. The curse protects me. Your shadows can hide us, and I can see things no one else can see. It's dangerous. Everything is dangerous, but sitting here while your brother rots in a cell is worse than dangerous. It's cowardly." She squeezed his fingers. "And you're many things, Theron Valecroft, but you're not a coward." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "All right," he said. "We move at midnight. But Alira, if things go wrong, if it becomes clear we can't win, I need you to run. Don't look back. Don't try to save me. Just survive." "No. Alira?" I said no. Her voice was steel. "We do this together, or we don't do it at all. I'm done surviving alone. If we die fighting. Side by side." Theron's eyes glistened with something she'd never seen there before. Tears, maybe? Or just the reflection of the fire she'd ignited in his frozen heart. "Together," he agreed hoarsely. And somewhere in the castle above, Marin smiled as she read the message from her scouts. The king and his void were exactly where she wanted them. The trap was almost ready to spring. Midnight came, wrapped in clouds and silence. Theron led Alira through the tunnel network until they emerged on the far side of the mountain, where a narrow path descended toward the coast. 2 horses waited, held by a young man with nervous eyes. "Fennec," Theron said quietly. "One of the few I still trust. He'll get word to our allies once we're gone." Fennec handed over the reins with trembling hands. "Your Majesty, are you certain about this? The fortress at Blacktide is impregnable, I know." Theron mounted, then pulled Alira up behind him. "That's why we're not attacking it. We're walking through the front door." The ride took the rest of the night, The coastal fortress was barely half a day's hard ride from Valdris, close enough for Valdric to strike quickly, far enough to disappear if needed. By dawn, they crouched behind a ridge overlooking a fortress that seemed to grow from the cliffs themselves. Black-tide, black stone walls, black iron gates, and waves crashing against rocks far below. Even from this distance, Elira could see guards patrolling the walls. "There are too many," she whispered. "There's always too many. That's never stopped me before." Theron's jaw was set, his eyes calculating. "The main gates will be heavily guarded, but there's an old smuggler's tunnel that comes up inside the kitchens. Kaelin and I found it as boys when we were exploring. Does Valdric know about it? Possibly, probably, but he'll expect us to try the subtle approach first. Sneak in, grab Kaelin, sneak out." Theron's smile was cold. "We're going to give him exactly what he expects. And while he's focused on the tunnel, I'll walk through the front door. Alone? I'm the Alpha King. They can't refuse me entry without declaring open war. Valdric wants legitimacy, not bloodshed. He'll let me in to negotiate. And then you free my brother while I keep my uncle occupied." He turned to face her, his expression softening. "Elira, I know I said we'd do this together, but I need you in that tunnel. I need you to get Kaelin out while I buy you time." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but she saw the logic, felt the rightness of it. "If you die in there, I'll never forgive you." "Then I'd better not die." He kissed her forehead, lingering for just a moment. "The tunnel entrance is behind that outcropping. Follow it until you smell bread baking. That's the kitchen. Kaelin's cell is in the east tower, 3rd level. How do you know?" "Because that's where our father put his own enemies. Valdric always was sentimental about tradition." He urged his horse forward before she could argue, descending toward the fortress with the terrible calm of a man who had nothing left to lose. Except he did have something to lose now, and Elira was not going to let him lose it. The tunnel was exactly where Theron said it would be. Narrow, dark, and smelling of salt and old secrets. Elira moved through it with one hand on the wall, letting Theron's shadows guide her when her eyes failed. They'd followed her. That was the strangest part. When Theron rode away, the shadows had clung to her instead, wrapping around her shoulders like a protective cloak, as if some part of him refused to let her go, even when his body couldn't stay. The scent of baking bread reached her after 20 minutes of crawling. She emerged behind a stack of flour sacks, peering into a kitchen alive with morning activity. Servants moved between ovens and cutting boards, none of them aware of the woman slipping past. Finding the East Tower was easier than she expected. The guards were sparse. Most had been pulled to the main hall, where she could hear raised voices echoing through the stone corridors. Theron. He was buying her time. The cell door was iron, locked with a heavy bolt. Elira slid it open, wincing at the scrape of metal, and stepped inside. Kaelin Valecroft looked nothing like his brother. Where Theron was dark and sharp, Kaelin was golden, tawny hair, amber eyes, a face built for laughter rather than war. But months of captivity had dimmed that light. He was thin, pale, with bruises on his wrists from chains that now lay empty on the floor. "You're not Marin," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "No, I'm Elira. Your brother sent me." Hope flickered in his eyes, fragile and fierce. "Theron? He's here. Distracting your uncle in the main hall. We need to go. Now." Kaelin rose on unsteady legs, bracing against the wall. "There's something you need to know. Valdric isn't just after the throne, he's after the curse." Elira paused. "What do you mean?" "He's been researching it for decades. He believes if he can bind Theron's curse to himself, he can control it. Become invincible." Kaelin's expression darkened. "That's why he needed me as bait. To get Theron here. To perform the binding ritual." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. "Where? Where is the ritual happening?" "The main hall. Elira, if Valdric completes the binding, he won't just have the curse. He'll have control over Theron's shadows, over Theron himself. She didn't wait to hear more. She ran. The main hall doors burst open under her hands, shadows flaring around her like wings. Inside, chaos reigned. Theron was on his knees in the center of a ritual circle, black chains binding his wrists and throat. Blood dripped from a wound on his temple. Valdric stood over him, chanting in a language that made Elira's skin crawl, while Marin watched from the sidelines with cold satisfaction. "Ah," Valdric said, pausing his chant. "The void arrives. Excellent timing. I was hoping you'd join us." "Let him go." "Or what? You'll mop me to death?" Valdric's smile was reptilian. "You have no power, girl. You're empty. Nothing. The only reason you're still breathing is because the curse found you useful." "You're wrong." Elira stepped forward, and the shadows around her flared brighter. "The curse didn't find me useful. It found me worthy." She didn't know where the certainty came from. But as she reached for Theron, as her hand closed around the chains binding him, she felt the truth of it in her bones. The curse wasn't a parasite. It was a guardian. It killed those who threatened its host, drained those who got too close. But Elira wasn't a threat. She was the opposite, an empty vessel that the curse could fill without destroying, a partner rather than a victim. The chains shattered. Theron rose, shadows erupting around him like a living storm. His eyes met hers, blazing with fury and love and terrible power. "Together," he said. "Together," she agreed. And together they turned to face the man who had tried to destroy them both. The battle was brutal and brief. Valdric was old, cunning, and had spent decades preparing for this moment. But he'd prepared for Theron alone, weakened by isolation and guilt. He hadn't prepared for Theron united with someone who made his curse stronger rather than lethal. The shadows obeyed Elira now as much as they obeyed Theron. She didn't understand how or why, only that when she reached for them, they responded. They became shields and weapons, walls and wings. Marin tried to run. Kaelin caught her at the door, weak but determined, and held her until guards loyal to Theron could take her into custody. And Valdric died with Theron's shadows wrapped around his throat, his dreams of power dissolving with his final breath. When it was over, Theron stood in the center of the ruined hall, covered in blood that wasn't his own, staring at his brother like he might disappear. Kaelin. The name broke on his lips. Kaelin crossed the distance and pulled his brother into a fierce embrace. "You came. I knew you'd come. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I didn't see." "Stop." Kaelin pulled back, gripping Theron's shoulders. "You saved me. That's all that matters." Elira watched them reunite, her heart full to bursting. She'd never had siblings, never known that kind of bond, but seeing it now, seeing Theron's walls crumble as he held his brother, she understood why he'd been willing to risk everything. Later, after the prisoners were secured and the loyal servants had regained control of the castle, Theron found her on the battlements. The sea stretched endlessly before them, gray and wild and free. 7 days, he said quietly, standing beside her. "That was our agreement." Elira's throat tightened. "I know. The debt is cleared. The gold is yours. You can leave whenever you want. Go anywhere you want. Start the new life I promised you." She should take it. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was the out she'd always wanted. Freedom, anonymity, safety. But safety, she was learning, wasn't the same as happiness. What if I don't want a new life? She turned to face him, her heart pounding. What if I want this life? Here, with you. Theron's breath caught. "Elira, the curse protects me. We've proven that. And even if it didn't, even if there was risk, I'd choose this. Choose you." She took his hand. "I spent 6 years just surviving. You showed me what it means to actually live." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Stay," he whispered against her lips. As long as you'll have me. Forever then. 3 months later, Alira stood in the Grove of the Lost. But today, she wasn't there to mourn. She was there to say goodbye. Theron stood beside her, watching as servants carefully removed the ribbons from the blackened branches. Each one would be given a proper burial, a final honor for the women the curse had claimed. "You're sure about this?" Alira asked softly. "The grove was meant to be a reminder of my failures, but you taught me something." Theron took her hand. "Carrying guilt doesn't honor the dead. Living fully does." The last ribbon came down, pale blue, faded with age, Theron's mother's. He held it for a moment, pressing it to his lips, then tucked it carefully into his pocket. "She would have liked you," he said. "She always said I needed someone who wouldn't take my nonsense." "Smart woman. The smartest." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. "Come, we have a ceremony to prepare for." The bonding ceremony took place under a full moon, in the same hall where they'd defeated Valdric. But now, the space was transformed. Candles lined every surface, their flames burning steady rather than flinching from Theron's presence. Flowers cascaded from columns, and the entire kingdom seemed to have turned out to witness their union. Kaelin stood as Theron's second, healthier now, his golden warmth returning day by day. He'd been the first to accept Alira fully, treating her like the sister he'd always wanted. "If you hurt him," Kaelin had said on their first real meeting, "I'll find a way to make you regret it. Void or not." "If I hurt him," Alira had replied, "I'll help you." They'd been friends ever since. The vows were simple. No grand declarations or elaborate promises. Just two people choosing each other, witnessed by those who loved them. "I, Theron Valecroft, take you as my bonded, my partner, my equal in all things. I promise to stand beside you in darkness and light, to share my shadows and accept your fire, to love you without chains and trust you without conditions, today and always." Alira's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. I, Alira of Merwyn, take you as my bonded, my home, my heart made manifest. I promise to fill your emptiness as you've filled mine, to see the man beneath the monster, to choose you every day for the rest of our lives, today and always. The kiss that sealed their bond sent shadows spiraling toward the ceiling, dancing with the candlelight in patterns that made the gathered crowd gasp. Not with fear, but with wonder. The curse had changed. Everyone could see it. Where once it had been cold and hungry, now it was warm, protective, complete. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the guests had departed, Theron carried Alira to their chambers. He made love to her with a tenderness that made her weep, worshipping every inch of her skin, murmuring her name like a prayer. Afterward, she lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. The same heartbeat she'd first noticed in that bolt hole, when she'd realized that the monster everyone feared was just a man who'd been alone too long. "What are you thinking?" Theron asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I almost didn't answer the door that night. When you knocked at the Hollow House, I almost pretended I wasn't there. Why didn't you?" "I don't know. Something told me to open it. Like my whole life had been leading to that moment." Theron pressed a kiss to her hair. "I'd been watching the Hollow House for 3 nights, trying to work up the courage to approach you. Everyone I'd consulted said a void was my only hope, but I was so afraid you'd run, that you'd look at me and see what everyone else sees. A monster? A curse wearing a crown." Alira lifted her head, meeting his eyes. "You know what I saw that night? A wounded man who was too stubborn to die and too proud to ask for help. Someone who needed kindness as much as he needed a void." Theron's smile was soft, open in a way he only ever was with her. "No woman ever survived me," he said quietly. "That's what they warned you. What they'd warned everyone for 20 years. And yet..." Alira settled back against his heart, feeling its steady rhythm beneath her cheek. "Here I am. Here you are." She closed her eyes, safe and warm and impossibly, perfectly loved. And for the first time in 20 years, Theron Valecroft watched a woman fall asleep in his arms, peacefully, trustingly, completely. The curse had found its cure. Not in magic or medicine or sacrifice, in love, freely given, in trust, fully earned. In a woman who'd been empty her whole life, finally finding someone who made her feel full. The hollow house still stands in Mirwin Village. They say it's haunted now, though not by the dead. By the memory of a single night when a king walked through its doors, and a barmaid found her destiny. Some nights, if you listen closely, you can hear echoes of that first conversation. A wounded stranger asking for shelter. A tired woman choosing compassion over caution. And if you're very lucky, you might feel what they felt. That spark of recognition when two souls finally find where they belong. Together. Always.